Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is the editor of British Vogue. In fact, he's in charge of all Vogue publications in Europe, Edward Enninful, and we're interviewing him because he's written a remarkable book called A Visible Man. Now, it's not the kind of memoir you might expect from an editor of Vogue, because it's really a book about being an asylum seeker, a black man, a gay man in the fashion industry who got his job at Vogue and decided to transform it. Let me just read one little line from the book where he said, "I have a thick skin, I can handle it, but I won't stand by and allow the next generation to go through the same kind of treatment if I can help it. I have the power to do something about it. If I'm not here to lift up the younger generation, then what the hell am I doing?" Edward, thank you very much indeed for
Thank you for having
joining
me.
us. How bad were things?
How bad were things? Growing up?
No, I mean in the industry that you came in to change.
Well, I came into an industry that sort of had a very thin definition of what beauty was, quite Eurocentric. And, you know, I come from a background where all women were celebrated, women of all different races, different religions, ages. That's what I came from. So for me, from the age of 18, when I started at ID magazine to now, my message has always been, let's show the beauty of women, the diverse range of women. And I've always shown that. So for me, it wasn't even anything new. It was just something that was always with me from my childhood.
Why do you think that wasn't being done?
I think there was just a myth that, you know, women of color don't sell on magazine covers. Women of color were somehow seen as down market when it came to advertising. And I knew that was wrong. And I knew that when I looked around the world I lived in, when I looked around and saw all these incredible women, like I said, a rainbow coalition, they needed to be in the magazine. They needed to be reflected. Their stories needed to be told. And British Vogue is so successful because we reflected society and the world we lived in.
I mean, you're very clear in the book and very sort of blunt, really, about racism and about discrimination. You know, would you say that the fashion industry was a racist industry?
I'll say the fashion industry always reflects the world. It's not racist in isolation, you know.
You don't think it was any worse than anything else?
No, it's not worse than anything, but it's probably more intensified because it's such a small industry with sort of a few people leading it. That's why, but it just reflects the world.
How much do you think it has changed since you became editor of Vogue and since the murder of George Floyd?
I mean, when I started in 2017, the idea of having a magazine that featured, you know, older women, you know, Asian women, women in hijabs, was unheard of. I mean, now I look around the landscape and it's almost seems normal, but it was a radical act at the time. Who is this black gay man thinking he can put, you know, people of color on the cover and have it sell? But the world was ready. And also, you know, I grew up with a certain fearlessness. If you read my book, you know, I come from a country where I was, you know, part of a nation of black people, moved to England where I was a minority and realized the difference. You know, that, oh my God, I am a black person in a different country. So I've always been fearless from the very beginning, and I believe that change only happens when you're not scared.
Do you feel like an insider now, or are you still an outsider?
But this is the irony. When I got the job at British Vogue, I was the outsider. But I'd been in the fashion industry since I was 18. I've been fashion director of ID, so I was also the ultimate insider. But I always talk about duality. You know, I grew up in a house where, you know, there was African food, African smells, African colors, and I went to school in England. where I stepped into another world. So this duality is really what's led me to this career that I've had, sort of being an outsider and an insider.
But I suppose, I mean, the outsider bit of it, you know, as is clear in the book,
Yes.
comes from a very, very different upbringing, both in Africa and in London when you arrived.
Yeah.
It was a working class upbringing in difficult circumstances. So do you, I suppose what I mean is, are you fighting this fight of inclusion for other people? Or is it also really about yourself?
I mean, for me, it's not even a fight. It's like, it's what should be. You know, everybody has to be included. And I don't even know if it's for myself. It's just something I've always done, something that was so innate. But my experiences, you know, like you said, growing up in Ghana on a military base, moving to England and being penniless has shaped who I am. So I really want to help anyone who's been othered. You know, anyone on the margins, anybody who doesn't feel good enough, you know, women who feel that because they're a certain size, the world doesn't see them. It's for all those people who feel invisible. For me, that's what my career is about, shining a light on all the people who feel invisible. And also, you know, showing that commercially that works.
People buy it.
Yes, at the end of the day, I could have shown, you know, whatever I wanted to show where diversity was concerned, but had it not worked commercially, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I'm so proud to have played a small part in showing that diversity does sell.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we're also in a bit of a backlash moment at the moment, aren't we, on diversity and the war on woke?
I mean, I don't even take that word on board. I mean, that means I must have been woke from when I was born. For me, you know, just literally reflecting what I see, showing the world in all its beauty, showing the beauty in all women, it's what my work is about. So words like woke, I mean, you know, I must be the the result of wokeness, you know. I was accepted into a country at a very young age, you know. I was welcomed and I had great mentors, you know, people who looked after me. And I just knew that it was my duty to bring other people up with me.
So would you make the case for being woke? Because we have a new Prime Minister who wants to sort of take on wokeism as she sees it in the civil service and in society.
I mean, I don't think the world's going to go backwards. I mean, I don't think we're going to take those steps back. We now know that we need to live in a world where, you know, people who've been invisible need to be seen, and you can attack that all you want, that fact will not disappear.
What does inclusion mean then to you?
Inclusion means, you know, just welcoming anybody who feels not seen. Like I said, you know, I can keep going back to, you know, whether it's their race, whether it's their religion, whether it's their age, whether it's their socioeconomic background. Just people who feel invisible, you know, being seen. And for me, when I know my job is done when I get a woman on the street, you know, different shape, come up and say thank you, or a little girl just said, oh my God, I look in Vogue now, and I'm in there all the time. For me, I always say, you know, if you can see it, you can be it. I didn't see myself reflected when I was growing up. So for me, it's my, you know, I'll do whatever I can to make people feel welcome, in my Vogue anyway.
But the conversation at the moment about refugees in Britain is about sending them to Rwanda. What do you think about that?
I think it's a terrible idea. I mean, you know, Great Britain was built, you know, on the back of so many refugees, whether they were from, you know, in India or Africa or, you know, other parts of the world. You can't just say, okay, we're not getting rid of people and sending them to another country. You know, I'm a refugee. And I believe that, you know, refugees contributed to the British society. So no, I don't agree with that at all.
Do you understand why it's sometimes people of colour in the government who are making the case for this?
I don't.
Does it
It doesn't make
perplex
sense
you?
to me, no, at all. That's just who I am.
I mean, you are one of the gatekeepers, one of the arbiters of beauty. So is there beauty in everything? You know, in all body shapes, in all facial features, in all colours, in all abilities and disabilities?
100%. I see the beauty in you know, in everyone. And I think for so long, people have dictated what beauty was. You know, it was very Eurocentric. You have to be thin. I didn't grow up with that. I mean, I grew up with, you know, like I said, aunts and grandmothers, and you know, who were all different shapes and sizes and all skin tones. And so for me, you know, when you mention the word woke, it's my way of life. It's my way of life. You know, I think beauty. We have to celebrate beauty in all its incantations, whatever you want to call it.
You say in the book that Brixton, 1985, and the death of Sherry Gross, was the first time I saw with my own eyes how badly black people in Britain are treated. Could you just explain that to me?
Oh my God, I mean, I'd come from, like I said, I'd come from Ghana where everybody was black, to Vauxhall and seen, you know, the police stop my brothers all the time, my cousins all the time. Literally, you know, the suspicion they had of black people. And I remember the Brixton riots and my dad always being so adamant, come home the minute school's finished. But knowing that we were not going to be treated how we were treated back home. And I learned that fast. I learned that so quickly how different I was. I learned that I was the other. I learned that I wasn't the norm. So that I learned so fast that, yeah, it just really shaped who I am today.
So were you brought up to accept being othered? You know, were you told, like many brown, black people are told, yeah, people will treat you like that, don't say anything, you know?
Yes, I was told, people are going to treat you like this, but, you know, work hard, work 10 times as hard, you know, be an academic person. But of course, I went the other way. I went into the media, I dropped out of university. But what I did know was that there were going to be so many challenges, but that they weren't going to stop me. I was not going to be stopped from getting to where I needed to get to, you know, at a personal cost too.
I'll just explain that.
Yes, you know, I mean, I was born with sickle cell trait and thalassemia, which really means that you have to relax all the time, you know, no stress. And I was literally the opposite, you know, hurtling forward, not stopping, you know, working all the time. I had a mission. You know, I wasn't going to be who they told me I was. Not worthy, not good enough. And that really propelled me, you know, sometimes in a sort of not a very healthy way, let's say.
Where did the mission come from?
I think it came from, you know, sort of having a military father who had to leave his country and really bring his kids along and really have nothing and start from scratch. You know, that immigrant mentality of what was the word I'm looking for? The image of sort of making something out, you know, out of life. And that's really what propelled me.
What was your dream then, when you were sort of 18, 19, you were at ID, and you were already remarkable?
Oh, thank you.
Where did you think you were going?
I mean, you know, I was never one of those who made 5-year plans. Like, sort of things happened and I went along with it, but I just knew that I didn't, you know, when you're the only one in an industry, you can either accept it, or I just knew that I wanted to bring people up with me. So I brought in sort of makeup artists and photographers of color, because I wanted people to be able to share and change this industry we were in. So for me, it was really about bringing people up with me, even when I was 18 years old.
How much resistance did you encounter?
Oh my God, a lot of resistance, but for me, that was never going to stop me.
What would people say?
Like I said, oh my God, you know, they'll say things like, and I talk about it in the book. Oh, another black model on the cover? Oh, another black model in the story? And I'd say yes. And here's another one. And here's an Indian one. And here's you know, and I just always, if you tell me I can't do something, I'd want to prove you wrong.
I mean, do you think the media should be representative?
Yeah.
Because what I mean is in a strict sense, in that, 8% black, 9% Asian, 4% Chinese, whatever the numbers might be. Because I suppose what people might say about your Vogue is there is a higher proportion of people of colour in your magazine than there are in Britain. And why is that a good thing?
I think, you have to, like I always say, you have to see it to be it, right? Britain is changing, and people need to see themselves. Vogue really needed to reflect. Because don't forget, Vogue's been around 106 years. It's always documented the world we live in. And for me, the fashion industry and Vogue had to embrace a changing world. And it's not just about colour when you look in Vogue, it's also about age. People, I remember we put Judi Dench on the cover and she was 85 years old. And they would say anybody over 60 in lockdown, stay at home. We put essential workers on the cover. So for me, it reflects Britain in all its glory, let's say, not just where race is concerned.
So let me go back to when you were younger, because you obviously, your early life seems to be a sort of a series of traumas. You lost your home, you left all the people you knew, you come to Britain, you're wrestling with your life and identity here,
Yes.
and discovering your sexuality.
Yes.
When you tell your father that you're working in fashion rather than going to college, he throws you out.
Yes.
That's a major, major trauma for somebody at that age after everything you'd been through.
Yes, my father comes from that generation who believed that, the way forward was to be academic, to be a doctor or a lawyer. He didn't know what the media was. He didn't even know you could make a career out of the media at that time. But I just knew, even at such a young age, that my destiny was in that world. And it took a lot of years, but obviously when the accolades started, he really realized that he'd made a mistake. But it is quite traumatizing to be kicked out of home as an 18-year-old who'd only been in this country, God, how many years before? 4 or 5 years before. But like I said, one thing that drove me forward was the idea that I was never going back home. I was never going to prove my dad right.
What did you do when he said go? Well, in fact, what happened? Because he didn't just say go.
No, basically, I was supposed to be attending Goldsmiths University, but I was spending my days around sort of ID magazine, around fashion people, fashion shoots, and he thought I was going to university. And I remember one day having the courage to tell him that I didn't want to be a lawyer and I wanted to be in the media, and that's when he was so enraged. He threw my things out of the window, and I remember sort of picking up my jeans, my t-shirts, and saying to myself, I am never coming back. I'm never going to give you the satisfaction of seeing me come back with my tail between my legs. And that same day I went to ID magazine, and the fashion director at the time was Beth Summers. I'd been working with her. And she said, okay, guess what? I'm leaving and you're taking over. The exact same day. How do you explain that?
So you were going to be fine?
Well, I didn't know at the time. ID magazine wasn't Vogue. I still wasn't making much money. I still didn't have any money, but all I had were big dreams and sort of an obsession with work. I'd crisscross London on foot to return samples, and I'd model to make bits of money. I'd cast. I'd do whatever was around.
Do you still have that kind of work ethic now?
Oh my God, yes. That will never go away. I wake up at 5 a.m., I meditate, I exercise, and I work. But now I know to finish at a good time. I know to look after myself. Back then it was just hurtling forward. People demonize work, and it's been, on one hand, it's been one of the most difficult things in my life. But also, on the other hand, I'm sitting here talking to you today because of work.
We're entering one of the most difficult economic periods in this country since you were growing up, probably.
Yes.
What does that mean for your industry?
Yes. I don't know if you know, but the fashion industry the past few years has been going through a bit of a reckoning. So the big conversation is about sustainability. How do we not pollute the world so much? So now everybody, my motto at Vogue really is buy better, buy less, which is really not what Vogue's supposed to tell you. But it's like buy things that last, that you can pass on to the next generation, not shopping every 2 seconds and, adding to pollution. So really the fashion industry is now trying to do something really good. And I'm actually quite proud of the industry for saying, let's tackle sustainability and what that means to our world.
But how do new seasons every year go hand in hand with sustainability?
I think now it's, the new seasons are not necessarily about go out and buy. It's about ideas as well. It's almost like a moment where we show the world, what's coming. So that would always be there. But within that, pick what you need.
But economically, what do you think is going to happen? Will businesses go bust? Do you think?
I think lockdown in lockdown, a lot of businesses disappeared anyway. A lot of businesses didn't come back. So we're all sort of trying to rally around the industry and help young designers. Help find finance for the next generation of designers. So I think there's a recession coming, yes, we all know, but we'll continue to do what we've always done, which is really push to support people who need it.
Recession can also be very creative.
Oh my God, it's the most creative. It's like, when you don't have money, even growing up, as I talk about in the book in Portobello Road, going through recession, we didn't have any money, but my God, we competed with each other. How to dress, how to outdress each other, how to create the most incredible editorials. So, yes, recession on one hand, it's a really serious thing to look at, but I also think for creative industries, it does inspire creativity because you have to survive.
And do you think your industry or the fashion industry needs any kind of help in this world?
Oh my God, I wish the government would help the fashion industry more.
How?
I don't feel that it's taken seriously as an industry. I think people think there's a lot of people running around being quote unquote fabulous, but I think the government really needs to look at the industry and what it brings to the country. That's something we're trying to, along with the British Fashion Council, trying to put forward every year. And so when you say it's not taken seriously, because the media used to be like that, but the media is now taken seriously because people have understood how big it is. Are there sort of specific things that you think? Because they think fashion's sort of a lot of mean people sort of hanging out together and always just obsessed with themselves. But there's so many people who really want to encourage a new generation, to make sure that we still have an industry, that we still have, we can still import and export clothes like we have been, create an industry that really works in the UK. It's really, really important. And, we will be lobbying with the government all the time. That's not going to stop.
The other thing that you've really written about in some detail about growing up was your sexuality.
Yes.
And discovering your sexuality.
Yes.
And I guess you're a bit of a late developer, weren't you?
Yes, very late. Yes.
Why do you think that is?
I grew up at a time when, everybody was really screaming about AIDS. Remember, the ads on TV with an iceberg, and I was so scared of sort of intimacy because they made us feel as young gay men that sex equaled death. So, I just dove into work. And it wasn't until sort of, like you said, years later that I thought, let me examine that side of my life. But I'm a black gay man, I always was. I didn't, have any big coming out disastrous stories. But I was a little wary because the government told us that to be gay equaled death at the time.
But also with a Ghanaian background.
Oh yeah.
Homosexuality is not acceptable today in Ghana, is it? let alone then.
Yeah. But like I said, you know, I mean, I left home so early. By 16, I was gone. So I didn't have to deal with family or, you know, I mean, I missed my family more than anything.
But I suppose those attitudes must have hung over.
Oh, no, I remember. Apparently, you know, when I was working in ID, I had a friend, a very Paul Hunwick, and he reminded me the other day that I had lunch with him, and I was so innocent and shy. And I asked him, is homosexuality a European thing? That's how naive I was. I was a little baby. But yes, it took me a few sort of years after that to think, maybe I am what they say gay is. And I embraced it fully. I'm very proud.
I guess your family, your parents must have had very strong views as well, growing up.
I mean, growing up, my dad would sort of say things like, oh, you know, if I found out you were gay, I'll do this, I'll do that. My dad was really more focused on education and creating a better life than homosexuality. It was something that wasn't even in his realm of possibility. So it wasn't something he focused on. He knew that, you know, I was sensitive and shy, but that's not what he focused on.
And did you ever have the conversation?
Oh, yeah. My first partner just said, here's my partner. And my mother was so happy. And funny enough, my dad was like, okay, I just have to accept it, you know. But at that time, I'd left home for so long. You know, I really feel for gay kids who lose the relationships with their family and have to, you know, run off to be somebody else. I mean, I left because I wanted to work. And then, you know, by the time I sort of accepted and embraced my gayness, I was already fully formed, so to say.
Well, how do you think Britain is now about attitudes towards sexuality?
I think Britain's come a long way. We can still do more. But what I always say is, you know, I mean, like when you look at what's going on with the trans community, black people cannot do it alone. Women cannot do it alone. Trans people cannot do it alone. Gay people cannot do it alone. You know, older women cannot do it alone. We need allies. And I feel like allyship grows stronger in Britain every day. And it's a whole new generation coming up who don't see anything, who don't see, you know, color, who don't see, you know, difference. They actually embrace differences. So I'm very hopeful for that generation.
Because in the same way that we talked about the backlash on woke, I mean, there is a clear backlash on trans, isn't there now?
Yes, clear.
And it comes from our political classes.
Yes. But I also remember when women were less than. You know, I remember when black people were less than, when gay people were less than. So they always have to be a focus on someone being less than. But let's hope, and I hope that as the years go on, there'll be more acceptance. You know, we've seen it happen with all these different groups.
Early on, again, in that bit after Brixton, you talk about Boris Johnson's right-wing government and the way it treated its own race report.
Yes.
Why did that disappoint you?
Well, I was disappointed because, you know, there were all these facts that were, you know, sort of glossed over to look like we live in a great world. You know, a great society. Though they looked at people like, I guess they look at people like yourself, myself, and think, oh, successful people of color means, you know, the race problem is solved. And it was just very disappointing because when you look at the numbers, I don't know the exact numbers, but you know, there are a lot of unemployed black teenagers more so than white. So yes, that was very disappointing, and I think, you know, the whole country saw that.
And so how do you feel about this government?
I mean, we have to hope for the better, right? We have to hope for the better. I mean, you know, I'm ready to sort of hope that things will get better, because without hope, you know, I'm somebody who shouldn't be here, who shouldn't be sitting here talking to you. My family would have probably not survived, you know, what was about to happen to my father, and I'm sitting here. And if I don't have hope, then there's no point doing what I'm doing. So I'm literally, you know, call me an optimistic, whatever, but I'm hoping that, you know, this country has moved forward in a good way. You know.
Would you put Liz Truss in Vogue?
Someone asked me that question before. Let's see how she pans out. How about that?
That doesn't tell me much. I mean, what do you think of her? I mean,
I'd like to see what she does as a leader. I'd like to see what she does as a leader, and then we can have this conversation again in 6 months' time.
Because Vogue is sort of, it's almost like a sort of, it's an instrument of soft power, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
You know, it's got huge influence in terms of who you put in there.
Yes.
You put the wife of President Zelensky
Yes.
in the magazine this year, and it was controversial.
Of course.
But
we don't shy away from controversy.
yeah, so can you tell me about your thinking for that, and whether? I mean, I was looking at the controversy and reading about it, I was thinking, well, I'm not really sure what the controversy is here, but do you look at African leaders in wars and think, let's put their wife in the magazine as well?
For me, Vogue's about the zeitgeist. It's about the moment. And at the moment, there's a war going on, and there was somebody, a figure, standing for hope, right? And the magazine, for me, is about women who really set out to change the world for good. So for me, there was not even a doubt that we were going to have her in the magazine. And you know, and anybody who really stands for change will be in the magazine. It's as simple as that for me.
Your philosophy of change is, again, very open and straightforward when you say you've got the power now. What more do you want to do with it?
I mean, I just want to sort of keep having these conversations, keep making Vogue, you know, the most welcome place for women, a safe place for women, but really keep having sort of conversations that it didn't have before, you know, around diversity and what that means, and reflect the world we live in.
What difference has it made changing the workforce in Vogue?
Oh my God. I always say, you know, a multitude of voices is better than one. I mean, now, you know, financially, it's doing better than it's ever done. On the newsstands, it's doing better than it's ever done because people see themselves. Every month you can pick the magazine up and know there'll be something for you.
And how did you avoid the trap of just replacing, I mean, forgive the caricature, but a load of posh white girls with a load of posh black girls?
No, I mean, we didn't replace a load of posh white girls with a load of posh black girls. What we did was we found people who were great at the job. You know, my staff is 40% not just black, but it's sort of 40% people from diverse backgrounds. And yeah, I just wanted people with a similar vision, people who saw things sort of differently than had been before. It was that simple. It wasn't getting rid of a group and bringing another group. You know, it was sort of, do we share the same vision of the world? And that was it. That's all you needed. That was the only criteria, really.
When you finally get to sort of taking over at Vogue towards the end of the book,
Yeah.
and you broach, you know, the sort of the controversy around you taking it over and the apparent disagreement with your predecessor, Alexandra Schulman. Has that been resolved?
I mean, you know, like I always say, you know, I had so much respect for Alex. She represented her time. I knew that I wasn't going to create a Vogue that was in her image. I always say to people, I knew what I wanted to do with Vogue. And I also thought I might get fired for it in 3 months. But I'd rather get fired for something I believed in than something to please others. And that really came from my childhood. But I said, you know, it was a different time. I think people were ready for my Vogue in 2017.
You have bad eyesight, and
Yes.
you've had to have operations for your eyesight. What kind of impact does that have on you when you're in such a visual medium?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I had essentially 4 retinal detachments, that was the darkest period of my life because I need my eyesight, you know. If I can't see, then who am I? But I also say, you know, I never had great eyesight. Like I had -10 glasses, and thankfully my eyes were restored. And I may not have vision in the normal sense of the word, but I have vision and creativity, and I can see images. So for everything you get, bad eyesight, I have incredible vision when it comes to creativity. So Can't complain.
And do you think about legacy? I mean, you think about, I know you're not going to tell me whether you want Anna Wintour's job, but you must think about handing Vogue on to another generation, British Vogue.
Yes.
So whenever you leave, whatever it is you go on to do, what is it you want for the future of the magazine?
Oh my God, I mean, like I always say, Vogue is 106 years old. It's the most important magazine in the world. When you're an editor, you're a custodian, however many years you're there, it's your responsibility to sort of look after it, keep its relevance. And then once you leave, you just have to let go and let them find the next person. It's as simple as that. It won't be up to me. It'll be, up to the powers that be to decide what kind of Vogue they want. So that's how I ended up here, because there was time for change. And we must always change, and we must always move forward.
And if you could change the world in any way, wave a magic wand, what would you do?
If I could change the world, that's a big question. I don't know, you got to think this, whatever, but I'll just make sure that people can, can make a living and live and be welcome in whatever world they choose to be in, or whoever they choose to be, be welcomed with open arms. And it goes back to being welcomed as a refugee. So that stays with me. That's very sort of deeply ingrained in who I am.
Edward Enninful, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.